The champagne glass shattered against marble. Sarah Chen's wedding reception had been perfect. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across 200 guests. The country club's ballroom buzzed with laughter and clinking silverware. Politicians mingled with business executives. The mayor sat at table 1. The governor's chief of staff held court near the bar. Then he walked in. The old man shuffled through the mahogany doors in a threadbare suit that hung loose on his skeletal frame. His shoes were scuffed leather, worn thin at the heels. Gray stubble covered hollow cheeks. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped conversations mid-sentence. It was where he sat down. The reserved table. Front row. 3 chairs draped in black ribbon sat empty beside a small American flag. A brass placard read, "In honor of our fallen heroes." The old man eased into the middle chair. The black ribbon fell to the floor. "Excuse me." Sarah's father, Richard Chen, approached with quick steps. His face flushed red above his tuxedo collar. "Sir, you can't sit there." The old man looked up with cloudy blue eyes. "Just need to rest my bones. Those seats are reserved." Richard's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "For our honored dead." A woman at table 7 whispered loudly. "How disrespectful." The old man's gnarled hands gripped the chair arms. "I understand." "Then move." Richard's words cracked like a whip. Wedding guests turned in their seats. Phone cameras emerged from purses and jacket pockets. Sarah felt her stomach twist as her perfect day tilted sideways. The old man started to rise, then sank back down. His breathing was labored, shallow. "I can't." His voice barely carried. "My legs, they don't work so good anymore." Richard's brother James stepped forward. James owned 3 car dealerships and served on the city council. He grabbed the old man's elbow. "Let's go, Pops. This isn't a homeless shelter." The old man winced but didn't resist. His weathered face showed no anger, only resignation. "Wait." Sarah moved between them, her wedding dress rustling. "Maybe we can find another seat." "Sarah." Richard's tone stopped her cold. "This is embarrassing enough." The guests watched like spectators at a car crash. Some filmed openly now. The mayor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The governor's chief of staff shook his head with disgust. "Look at him," someone muttered. "Probably drunk." The old man's hands trembled as he tried to stand. His right leg buckled. He caught himself on the table edge, knocking over the small flag. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "That's enough." James grabbed the old man's arm harder. "Security." 2 uniformed guards appeared from the hallway. They'd been watching from the beginning. "Sir, you need to leave," the first guard said. His voice was professional, but firm. The old man nodded slowly. He reached into his coat pocket with shaking fingers. Sarah expected him to pull out a wallet or ID. Instead, he retrieved a small photograph, creased and faded. He placed it gently on the table next to the fallen flag. Then he let the guards escort him out. The ballroom doors closed with a soft thud. Conversations resumed like nothing happened. Someone righted the flag. The photograph disappeared into a busboy's apron. But Sarah couldn't stop staring at the empty chair. The reception continued. The band played. People danced. Sarah cut cake and threw her bouquet. She smiled for photos and hugged relatives. But something gnawed at her chest, a weight that made breathing difficult. At midnight, after the last guest left, Sarah found herself alone in the ballroom. The cleanup crew worked around her, stacking chairs and folding tablecloths. "Excuse me." She approached the busboy who'd cleared the memorial table. "The photograph that old man left. Do you still have it?" The young man looked nervous. "I wasn't supposed to keep it, but..." He pulled the photo from his pocket. Seemed wrong to throw it away. Sarah held the photograph under a table lamp. The image was black and white, edges worn soft from years of handling. 3 young soldiers in dress uniforms stood at attention. They couldn't have been older than 20. One face made her breath catch. The soldier on the left had the same eyes as the old man. 50 years younger, but unmistakably, the same person. Sarah flipped the photo over. Faded blue ink spelled out, Korea, 1,950. 3. Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion. Kia, Tommy Chen, age 19. Billy Santos, age 20. Survivor, Frank Morrison, age 21. Chen, her maiden name, her grandfather's name. Sarah's knees went weak. She sank into the nearest chair as the pieces clicked together. Her grandfather, Thomas. The uncle she'd never met, killed in Korea before she was born. Before her father was born, her family never talked about him. Her father had built his success story around pulling himself up from nothing. The American dream. He'd never mentioned the uncle who died for that dream. But someone remembered. Someone had carried that photograph for 70 years. Sarah drove through empty streets toward downtown. The address in the phone book led to a rundown apartment complex near the railroad tracks. Building C, Apartment 12. She knocked softly. No answer. She knocked harder. Frank? Her voice cracked. Frank Morrison? The door opened slowly. The old man stood in the gap, wearing a faded bathrobe. His eyes widened when he saw her wedding dress. "You're Thomas Chen's granddaughter," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, tears starting. "Why didn't you tell us?" Frank stepped aside to let her in. The apartment was sparse but clean. A single bed, a small table, and covering every wall, photographs. Soldiers, hundreds of them. Some in black and white, others in color. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq. Men and women in uniform, most barely old enough to vote. "Every Memorial Day," Frank said quietly, "I visit their families, the ones who made it home. I tell them their boys and girls aren't forgotten." He walked to a corner where dozens of funeral programs were neatly stacked. "Some families want to see me. Some don't. Your father. He never wanted to hear about Tommy." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I didn't know. Tommy saved my life." Frank picked up a Purple Heart medal from the table. "Threw himself on a grenade meant for me. I promised I'd look after his family. I tried." The weight in Sarah's chest grew heavier. "The chair tonight. I go to weddings sometimes. Graduations. Big celebrations. I sit in Tommy's place." Frank's voice grew thick. "So, he doesn't miss the important moments." Sarah broke down completely. 70 years of gratitude, decades of silent devotion. And they'd thrown him out like garbage. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Frank patted her shoulder with a gentle hand. "You didn't know, child. How could you know?" But Sarah did know. Deep down, she'd felt it. The wrongness of their actions. The cruelty of their assumptions. "There's something else," Frank said. He moved to a wooden chest beside his bed. "Tommy wanted his family to have this." He pulled out a folded American flag. The kind they drape over coffins. The kind they give to families at military funerals. "I've been carrying it since 1953. Waiting for the right moment." Sarah took the flag with trembling hands. It was heavier than she'd expected. Heavy with honor. Heavy with sacrifice. Heavy with love that transcended death. "Keep it," Frank whispered. He'd want his family to have it now. 3 days later, Sarah stood at a podium in the country club ballroom. The same room where Frank Morrison had been humiliated. This time, the crowd was different. Veterans filled every seat. Young and old. Men and women who'd served in different wars, different decades, but understood the same code, the same bond. At the front table sat Frank Morrison. Not in the memorial chair this time. In the seat of honor. "I called this gathering," Sarah began, "because 3 nights ago, we made a terrible mistake." She told them about Tommy Chen, about Frank Morrison's promise, about 70 years of silent service to the families of the fallen. She told them about the photograph Frank had carried across 7 decades, about the Purple Heart he'd earned and never mentioned, about the Medal of Honor recommendation that had gotten lost in military bureaucracy but not lost in the hearts of men who'd served beside him. Frank Morrison didn't just survive Korea, Sarah said. He survived to remember. He survived to honor. He survived to love. The room was dead silent. 200 people hung on every word. What we thought was disrespect was actually the deepest respect possible. What we thought was intrusion was actually devotion. What we thought was wrong was actually the most right thing anyone could do. Sarah paused. Her voice grew stronger. "Frank Morrison taught me something about honor. Real honor doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It just shows up. Day after day. Year after year. It sits in empty chairs so the dead aren't forgotten." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads nodded. Hands wiped eyes. "There's someone here today who needs to meet Frank Morrison properly." Sarah looked toward the back of the room. General Patricia Williams flew in from the Pentagon this morning. The crowd turned as a woman in full military dress uniform walked down the center aisle. Stars gleamed on her shoulders. Ribbons covered her chest. Her bearing commanded instant respect. She stopped in front of Frank's table. "Mr. Morrison," General Williams said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I've spent 3 days reviewing classified records from the Korean War. Records that were buried in bureaucracy for 70 years. Frank looked confused. "Ma'am?" "Stand up, soldier." Frank rose slowly, confusion turning to worry. General Williams continued. "On the 17th of November, 1953, near Pork Chop Hill, you single-handedly held off a Chinese assault for 6 hours. You saved 37 American lives. Your commanding officer recommended you for the Medal of Honor." The room held its breath. That recommendation was lost in the chaos of war's end. Today, by order of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, that wrong is being corrected. General Williams opened a small blue box. "Franklin Morrison, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, I present you with the Medal of Honor." The room exploded. 200 people leaped to their feet. Applause thundered off the walls. Cameras flashed like lightning. But Frank Morrison just stood there. Tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. General Williams placed the medal around his neck, then stepped back and snapped a perfect salute. Every veteran in the room followed suit. Arms raised in perfect synchronization. A sea of respect for a man they dismissed 3 days earlier. Frank tried to speak, but no words came. He touched the medal with shaking fingers, as if it might disappear. Sarah stepped forward and took his hand. "Tommy would be proud," she whispered. Frank finally found his voice. "He already knew. He was there when I earned it." The applause continued for 5 full minutes. When it finally died down, Frank Morrison looked out at the crowd. His voice was stronger now, clearer. "I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because Tommy Chen died for me, and Billy Santos died for me, and every soldier who didn't make it home died for all of us." He paused, gathering strength. "We remember them not with statues or speeches. We remember them by living lives worthy of their sacrifice, by showing up when it matters, by sitting in their empty chairs so they're never alone." Frank looked directly at Sarah. "Thank you for giving an old soldier the chance to tell Tommy's story one more time." Later that evening, as the ceremony wound down, Sarah walked Frank to his car. The same beat-up Honda he'd driven to her wedding. "Will you come to family dinners?" she asked. "My father. He wants to learn about Tommy." Frank smiled for the first time since she'd known him. I'd like that. Tommy always loved family dinners. As he drove away, Sarah stood in the parking lot watching his taillights disappear. The country club's lights dimmed behind her. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed midnight. Sarah looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Uncle Tommy." The wind seemed to whisper back. In apartment 12, Frank Morrison carefully hung his Medal of Honor on the wall next to Tommy Chen's photograph. For the first time in 70 years, the old soldier slept peacefully. He'd kept his promise, and Tommy Chen's family finally knew they were loved.